On the Mornington Peninsula, the Victoria Police will tell you family violence is the single biggest issue.
So it makes sense that if there's a high incidence of it in the community, then it may also be an issue for our employees.
We, for years and years, have talked with our sisters in the domestic violence area about what does it mean for a woman when she's experiencing domestic violence and she has a job.
When I first saw it, I thought, oh, that seems a bit of a strange clause, but now, as here, it seems fairly obvious. Within weeks of the enterprise agreement being certified, we had 3 people access it quite immediately.
But for us, it's more than just leave. I mean, we tend to concentrate on the leave, and we've had work sites where they'll say, well, look, we'll put 2 lines in just where it talks about special leave or something, just saying you can have access to leave. And we've said no, we very much want to have a specific clause that talks about domestic and family violence. We want to turn a light on where there's darkness. We want to have it very explicit that family violence is not tolerated in this workplace, and you will get support if you are experiencing family violence.
I can tell you that most women who ring our centre don't immediately disclose that domestic violence is part of a workplace issue. It is only in the way we hear her story and the way we have learned to ask questions that we get an inkling of what else might be going on. Once we can have a conversation with a woman, you can hear the relief in her voice when she feels safe enough to disclose that domestic violence or family violence might be part of what's happening to her in her workplace.
We know that paid employment is an important step in ensuring that women who are in violent relationships are able to leave, and we thought that providing and putting a clause together and putting it to both the university sector and the New South Wales Government was an important step in providing an extra form of economic security for women. So we developed a model clause. We launched the clause with the Clearinghouse at the University of New South Wales in April last year, and that launch was attended by the Federal Minister for the Status of Women, Tanya Plibersek, and the Federal Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Elizabeth Broderick.
The first thing you have to do is you've got to get your delegates to understand what it's about, and sometimes it's the delegates that bring it to you, so that that's not an issue, but it might be explaining it to other delegates, then explaining it to members. Because the way that we get a provision up is by having the support of our members. We're a member-based organisation. There's no use us doing things in a vacuum. It's got to have the support of our workers that are in a particular workplace. It's also about education. So in the first ones that we do, I would actually go into the negotiation, very unusual, I would go into the negotiating meeting and spend half an hour, 3/4 of an hour explaining what domestic and family violence is.
There has been some concerns from HR and IR practitioners about about the granting of the leave. So the conversations we're trying to have with them at the moment is an educational one of when you have a situation, it's about this clause is the mechanism for having a conversation. We found that there was some mass panic about leave at the beginning.
Our unplanned absence is basically our Victorian benchmark, that having more flexible arrangements does not necessarily cost you more, even if you only measure the actual cost of the leave. Now, we get it back many times over in terms of the commitment that our people show, but just on the basis of the leave itself. And the idea that a whole huge bunch of people are going to be off on sort of endless family violence leave is just so facile.
I think that everything sort of fell into place once we relaxed about not having a quantifiable number. I think it became easier to negotiate because the employer wasn't counting it anymore. It wasn't something they had to put to their own costs. The commitment from our executive, the union, our General Secretary and Assistant Secretary to pursue this to the highest level in government, and because of that, the Premier, I think, saw that this was something that the government could do. We basically spent a whole year campaigning to convince the government that that was something that they should do, and it was one of the last things they did before the government was, before the election earlier this year.
We are very fortunate. We have had a chief executive who finished up last week who was passionate about domestic violence. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, you know, why would such a male-dominated organisation get involved in this space? Not only was it the unions bringing it to us, it was also the fact that we had the backing of the chief executive.
And I just want to make the point that the branch secretary of the ASU, so the boss of the ASU, came to every single meeting in our state to negotiate that, which was really a big deal. It's not very often that you would see a branch secretary being that dedicated. So I think a lot of how great this has turned out has got to do with her commitment.
What we negotiated was an unlimited supply of special paid leave for our people.
A combination of people having time to go to solicitors, time to go to court for intervention orders, and time leave because of injuries.
Or changing their work hours because they have childcare requirements, or they're travelling, you know, they're having to move, so there's different travel. So that's mainly what it's doing for our organisation, so it's a little bit of a shift of thinking.
For employees to actually have confidence to use these new entitlements and to use policy and procedures, they've got to trust them, and they've got to trust that they're not going to be adversely affected as a result of having accessed them. And in the university sector today, you know, which is probably contrary to a lot of commonly held belief, there's a large proportion of precarious employees employed in that sector now, and you know, so building up that culture and that trust to actually use the entitlements and to disclose, I think is going to be one of our biggest challenges.
The other thing we want to have very much up front is safety plans, that you can go to your employer if you're experiencing family violence and saying, I have concerns for my safety and welfare because of this set of circumstances. How can we work together? Can my family violence worker, can we all sit down together and make a way that I can continue earning an income, which is going to help me leave the situation I'm in, and be safe as well.
We treat it a bit like our EAP program, highly confidential, so then it's really just need to know. In terms of what evidence, I guess they just need to bring something, whether it's something from a doctor or something, and they only need to show it to the person that they're directly dealing with. We've got training some contact officers, and we'll be training managers so that they know how to respond if someone comes to them.
What does it mean for our organisation, for the University of New South Wales? I think what it's done is it's been a start to opening a very important door to actually developing in practice the ways and means that both management, the unions and other support staff are going to start to take the very practical steps from taking commitment at the high level, at the theoretical level, to managing issues like domestic violence and how they impact on the workplace, to actually bringing about practical policy and procedural documentation, education and training packages across the university, which will then allow staff to actually have confidence in what we've achieved. It's not just words on paper, but will actually become a part of the culture.
We're a government-owned corporation, and we acknowledge the fact that we have the ability to actually shape community. Queensland Rail has been around for 120 plus years. They're a very traditional organisation. We're in most country towns in Queensland, and we know that we could actually play a major part in the community thinking on this issue.
If we can say that our humble little organisation can do this and the sky doesn't fall in, how fantastic it would be for many more organisations.
It's also very important because rail members make up about 25% of the membership of our branch, so we have another 75% of the membership where we can use this example as a very good and a very positive example of very strong leadership and get changes in the other industries that we cover as well.